The First World War saw most of Europe's great powers drawn into bloody trench warfare. Seemingly absent from the conflict was neutral Sweden, determined to maintain its peaceful and diplomatic role. Sweden had maintained a policy of neutrality since the end of the Napoleonic Wars, which had given it a status as a reliable and neutral country in the eyes of many. Yet, during World War I, Sweden would end up entangled in an unlikely conflict in a country far away, where its officers would find themselves at odds with the mightiest powers of Europe. This is the story of the Swedish volunteers in Persia. In the early 1900s, the Qajar dynasty in Persia was in a weak state. The central government had a hard time exerting control over its big territory, as it suffered from political instability. Conflict between constitutionalists and the Shah dominated its politics, and in 1907 Russia and Great Britain had intervened in the north and south of the country to create economic spheres of influence, with Britain getting access to much of the country's oil. This, in addition to influential mullahs and merchants often turning against the government, meant that the rulers in Tehran had little control over its rural and far-off regions. The military Persia possessed was considered ineffective and neglected by the rulers, as the Shah lacked the means to control his own territory, and the situation between the great powers in the region was getting heated. It was decided that a modern Gendarmerie force was needed to help provide security and stability. And who to help with its creation and training? Sweden. The great powers understood that a modern branch of Persia's military was needed to keep some sense of order in the land. Sweden was a perfect fit for this, as it was a neutral country that was mostly trusted by the great powers. In 1910, the Persian government reached out to Sweden, requesting officers that could help train and modernize the Persian forces. Sweden accepted this. Swedish officers started to arrive in 1911. A total of 36 would serve in Persia. Leading the Swedish effort was Harald Hjalmarsson, who would become general during his time in the country. The Swedes trained some 200 officers and 7,000 soldiers of the Gendarmerie. The training was a success, and it became an effective military force despite its small size. Fighting against rebellious villages and tribes could be intense. Firefights, ambushes, the taking of prisoners. It was all part of the game, as Tehran was trying to maintain control of its roads and regions. The Swedish officers were often close to the action, along with the Gendarmerie. At least 4 Swedes gave their lives serving in Persia. The Swedish effort would find itself under strain, however, as World War I broke out in Europe. Despite initially being positive to Swedish assistance in Persia, both Britain and Russia had some suspicions about the Swedes in Persia being too pro-German. Although Sweden was neutral during World War I, many in Sweden favored Germany over the Allied powers. Several in the military and political class had sympathy for Germany, while fearing Russia. In 1915, things escalated in the Middle East as the Allies took action in Persia in order to counter German and Ottoman influence. When the British occupied the Bushehr area on Persia's southern coast in 1915, it sparked outrage from the Persian government, who was trying to maintain its neutrality. The justification on the British side being the need to handle German influence in the area. The local Gendarmerie opposed the occupation, but were disarmed by the superior British force. The Gendarmerie also resisted the Russians from the north during battles like the one in Robat Karim. Here too the Allies came out on top. Despite being effective at crushing local rebels and occasionally defeating pro-Allied tribes, the firepower of Britain and Russia was too much for the Gendarmerie to confront. The Swedes suddenly found themselves under pressure to round up their efforts with the Gendarmerie. The operation was concluded in 1915. In February of that year, however, a Swedish artilleryman signed up to German service, meeting with representatives in Tehran. 5 more Swedes followed, and they ended up serving in Persia and Mesopotamia. The purpose of the German mission in the region was to assist the Ottomans in their fights. For the next years of the war, the Swedish officers assisted the Central Powers in their regional campaign. One Swede, Officer Kilander, even became second in command of a German unit in Mosul. Although Sweden's operation had officially ended, several Swedes remained to support the Gendarmerie, Germany and the Ottomans in their struggle against the Allies. Despite Russia's withdrawal during its revolution, Britain managed to gain the upper hand in the region, and as the war was coming to a close in 1918, many Swedish officers returned home. In the case of General Hjalmarsson, he went on to fight in the Finnish Civil War. The Gendarmerie retained Swedish leadership as Colonel Tage Glerup continued the effort from 1918 to 1921. Even though Persia became a battleground for greater powers in World War I, the Gendarmerie prevailed as a policing force. It continued its role after the war and remained an important tool under different regimes. It lived on until 1991, when it was merged with other agencies to form Iran's current police force.